And to discuss the latest news on Iran and other political news of the week, I'm joined by two political pros from both sides of the aisle to discuss U.S. foreign policy and other top political stories. Republican strategist Rina Shah, she's a former senior aide to multiple Republican members of Congress, and Democratic strategist Joel Payne, chief communications officer for Move On and former deputy press secretary to former Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Thank you both so much for joining me today. A busy, busy week. My goodness, we have so much to talk about. Now, on Iran, aside from being a huge geostrategic and military story, it's also a really big political story here in Washington. The primary season, of course, kicked off earlier this week, and there's a question over how much this war will have an impact on the midterms. I had Mercedes Schlapp, who worked in the first Trump administration and the George W. Bush administration, on the show last week. Take a listen to what she had to say.
If the administration moves towards what you would say more military tactics, a more aggressive posture into Iran, I think that could be detrimental for Republicans going into the midterm elections.
Now, Rina, when I spoke with the president this week, he was very bullish on Iran. He feels he does have the support of the American people. What is your perspective on how this is impacting domestic politics?
His posture is unsurprising to me because this is what he has to do in the aftermath. But now when we enter week 2, week 3, week 4, how does he change himself? Because decisively, the American people have said, we don't want more foreign wars. We don't want a nation built abroad. And that is coming from his base. He had a mandate from the MAGA faction as well as the America First faction to not create new conflicts, new zones for us to enter into. This hasn't been created for us. I would just say this is an opportunity that presented itself, and he took it. Now, he knew he was taking a risk, but when you have this great opportunity to go get this bad guy, and Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, I think he would have been foolish not to take it. And so I would say this is not a war. This is a combat operation for now.
The president and a lot of his aides have referred to it as a war, though. I mean, Joel,
Sure.
For Democrats, what is the risk and opportunity here on how your party handles this?
Well, look, I want to pick up with that last point. It is a war, and it's a war of choice. And I think that what President Trump and Republicans, I think, are missing here is this is unlike recent foreign policy, national security imbroglios that we've seen, because the public is starting off underwater, meaning the president does not have broad public support on this the way that, say, President Bush had. When you look at Iraq, when you look at even Barack Obama with Syria, with other presidents, with other international quagmires in the past, those things often started with the public more broadly supportive of what the president wanted to do. That's not where Donald Trump is. The public at best is very split and very has very complicated views about involving yourself in a Middle East country in this type of a foreign policy challenge. And so just related to the whole topic of how Democrats react here, there is no support within the base of the Democratic Party to move forward. And I actually think that tracks to the broader public as well. And I think if you're a Democrat who has future ambitions, not just for 2026, but 2028 and beyond, you cannot get on the wrong side of your base here. I look at an example of a recent Sunday show appearance with Mark Kelly, a senator from Arizona, where he somewhat waffled on whether or not he would support the War Powers Resolution, which, of course, was of topic in Congress this week. Mark Kelly, pretty shortly thereafter that appearance, made it clear that he would be with the base on that decision. And I think you're going to see a lot of those types of, calculations among Democrats who want to have a future within the party and within the coalition.
You think they need to be clear?
They need to be clear that they oppose this war. They oppose this as a war of choice. They name this as Donald Trump's war, and they name this as something that the public is not with. I cannot register how unpopular this already is. And the best day of this war, of this interaction, was the first day. Killing the Ayatollah and having a strong U.S. military presence the first day, that's the best day.
Yeah, Rina, there's the president's messaging on this, and then there are Republicans who are campaigning in competitive districts and swing states right now in this midterm year. How do Republicans at large handle the messaging on this?
The messaging has been fumbled. I agree with that because there was an opening for Donald Trump to come out and do this the right way. Say, hey, our intelligence led us to this. We've been looking at this for weeks on end, and this is what it led up to. Instead, he came out and said, well, they teed us off, and so we walked away and said, we're not going to take any more, and we're going to bomb them. And I just don't think that that sort of rationale worked in his favor. In fact, I think it worked against him, and particularly at a time where he should be looking for the buy-in of Democrats in Congress to look like he's a very unity-driven president. He hasn't done that. Now, look, I'm not advising the White House, but for a few days, they called this a combat operation. I personally, if I were advising the White House, which I'm not, would continue with that verbiage, because when you say war, again, you leave an opening for the Democrats to say this is Donald Trump's war. So I think every day that passes, the American consciousness starts to feel that, why is my country doing this abroad, and why are things the way they are at home? So he's making it tough for Republicans in Congress, but I still think there's an opportunity to win here. I still think there is a way for American military might to win. Right now, operationally speaking, things are going extremely well. Our forces, in conjunction with Israel's forces, are doing the type of I would say military exercises from the air and in a cyber way that I didn't even know that we could know about. And we are learning of that in real time. Now, the minute a foot hits the ground, when you get an American body on the ground, that is where everything changes.
And that's where where the message from the White House is going to matter even more.
Right.
Can he bring the American people along here? I do want to move us to another element of midterms impact, because there's so much going on this week. We learned this week that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem will be stepping aside, and that Senator Markwayne Mullin will be taking her place. Of course, immigration has become a very controversial and challenging issue for the White House. What do you make of this timing, Joel? Yeah,
she was voluntold to step aside, which I think in Donald Trump's Washington we know is that she was fired. I think with the timing is you cannot miss the fact that this comes on the heels of a disastrous appearance that Kristi Noem made in front of Congress the same week, where essentially even Republicans, and there were notable Republicans on the Senate side who gave her really tough questioning and really signaled a loss of faith in even President Trump's base in Kristi Noem. That comes after weeks of the administration stepping back from their elevation, their escalation of ICE all around the country that Kristi Noem was responsible for, the corruption at ICE, the controversial decisions, the close relationship with she and Corey Lewandowski. I think that Kristi Noem was always the kind of emergency cord that Donald Trump could pull if he wanted to reset the conversation around DHS and around ICE. He will obviously have to continue to tweak policy and tweak prioritization of what this agency is doing to have the public reverse their disapproval of how ICE is being run. But I think this is a big step towards Donald Trump trying to reset the narrative. Only time will tell if he'll be successful in doing that.
Was this a good decision by the president?
It was the right decision. It's one I believed he would make as far back as when he replaced her with Tom Homan, essentially in Minnesota. He put Tom Homan right there in Minnesota, and that's where the friction began. And I could see it right there. When Tom is brought in to be sort of cooler, calmer-minded, that's a bad look for Kristi Noem, and I believed her unraveling began then.
What do you think of the replacement, Senator Markwayne Mullin?
Yeah, I think Senator Mullin is interesting because I observed him in the House quite a bit. He is very proud to do what Donald Trump wants him to do. He believes in having a strong plan for curbing illegal immigration, and I know that much, but that's not what he's going to be tasked with entirely. He's going to have to give a better look to the agency. He's going to have to, again, do what Tom Homan did in the face of chaos in Minnesota. Say, hey, we're capable of being adults here, and we're capable of not descending into chaos all the time. Mullin is in lockstep with the president, so I think he'll actually take orders directly from the president and maybe even Homan to some extent. He'll be a figurehead, I think, in a way that Noem, I think she thought she could do better than she did. And I was watching for a while, but she was also then turned into a figurehead. So I think only time could tell is what I'm trying to say. This is just such a contentious issue. The biggest thing I'm concerned about, though, and that never gets talked about in the national conversation, is how we have so many visa overstays. How come nobody's tackling that part? So maybe this is an opportunity for the department to do better.
Yeah, I think that this becomes immediately a proxy vote on Donald Trump's immigration approach and regime for Democrats. So whether or not Markwayne Mullin might have the support of some of his Senate colleagues, I think it is, again, a non-starter for the base of the Democratic Party to support anyone in the Trump administration who is going to execute his immigration policy the way that it's been executed for the last year and a half. To have any chance of anyone beyond John Fetterman getting support beyond John Fetterman, you as a nominee to join Donald Trump's cabinet are going to have to show a significant break in policy to get any Democratic support beyond that.
Do you think that there's a world in which Trump making this move could help with the DHS funding fight with the shutdown?
I imagine that Donald Trump probably sees this as an opportunity to reset the conversation there. Again, if Markwayne Mullin comes out and reset some policy priorities, reset some talking points about what DHS is going to be focused on, what ICE is going to be focused on. I mean, I suppose there's a possibility that there's some Democrats who might shake loose, but I will just tell you, as someone who works for an organization that represents millions in Democratic base, the appetite is not there to support any part of the president's agenda.
Joel, I get it. There's been cruelty in certain moments. And I'm somebody that believes in compassionate conservatism, and I don't want to see families, split apart. But I will say there really is, with this administration, a sense that they could deport more people instead of hold them in detention centers. I realize they are building more detention centers. But could Democrats come along at some point and say, you know what, we need to be a nation of laws?
The president has lost a lot of public trust. He's certainly lost trust in the Democratic base that he has good intentions here. And I think he's lost broader public trust. This was his strongest issue coming into his presidency, plus 5-10 points. He is now well under 15 points.
And with the moderate Republicans, too, I certainly have had a lot of concern about how these policies have been deployed and essentially implemented in certain places. But there is a tension between state and federal. In Minnesota, you have that because some of the policies on the books. So I don't know that it can get any better simply because of what is going to exist in certain states.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see because we've got immigration that's going to impact the midterms. We have this war in Iran that's going to impact the midterms. But then the number one issue that voters keep saying is going to drive them to the polls is affordability, the economy. And take a look at this headline. Trump concedes Iran war may push up oil prices for Americans. The president says higher energy costs will be temporary as markets react to the conflict, and the White House faces questions about strikes rationale. Now, in my conversation with the president, he dismissed the idea that oil prices would have an impact on the midterms. He believes that the American people are with him on this. Rina, do you agree with the president, or do you think the price of gas could be a problem?
I completely disagree with the president. I mean, if we tick up towards $4 per gallon as we get towards November, then that is the kiss of death. That means Republicans, we lose our majorities. And I think the president already kind of set the stage for that. He's kind of conceded in certain talks that maybe the trifecta won't hold. And so that's something that I don't know why he speaks that way, because that really kind of, it's not the strong man that he wants to show, right? It's almost kind of conceding that there's nothing he can do. At this point in time, I think other countries who could get with us could certainly help us with the Strait of Hormuz. But I'm not really sure geopolitically how this plays out in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Joel, Democrats, one of the challenges for your party has been having to be so reactive to so many of the different things that the president is doing. But again, voters are really focused on those kitchen table, pocketbook issues. Can Democrats keep hammering the affordability message, especially as we are looking at these possible higher gas prices?
I've talked about this publicly. Democrats have to do everything. This is not the type of information ecosystem where you can just silo a conversation and say, we're going to talk about national security today, we're going to talk about the economy tomorrow, we're going to talk about foreign policy next week. You got to talk about it all, and you have to tell one continuous story. I think Democrats are getting better at that. Related to Trump, here's the problem, Dasha. These are not exogenous events that are causing these economic challenges for his administration and for the public. This is a war of choice he's taken on in Iran that is going to have knock-on effects on oil prices. The tariff war that he has waged, that is a decision of choice that Donald Trump has taken on. All of the conflagrations that we're experiencing in this country seem to be the result of Donald Trump's whims. These aren't exogenous events like COVID 5 years ago that Donald Trump could point to and say, I have no control over this. These are all of his control. And I will just tell you, if you're a Republican, not just in the frontline seats, say, trying to win in North Carolina, trying to win in Maine, if you're Susan Collins, or trying to win in Ohio, if you're Houston, but if you're Dan Sullivan in Alaska going against Mary Peltola, potentially, you are feeling much more concerned. If you're in Iowa and you're trying to win that open seat, you are feeling much more concerned. So I actually think what Donald Trump has actually done, he's put the Senate in play for Democrats with his choices.
While we're whipping out states, Texas this week, that was wild to watch. Republicans are now in a runoff there. The president has said that he will endorse in that race. So you have the incumbent Senator John Cornyn, you have the sort of MAGA superstar firebrand Attorney General Ken Paxton. He told me in our phone call that Ken Paxton coming out saying he won't drop out even if Trump endorses Cornyn, might actually push Trump to endorse Cornyn. He said that was bad for Paxton to say. Rina, what do you make of the results? I mean, I think Cornyn did a little better than folks expected, but it was still quite a split among the Republican Party. And what should Republicans be hoping for there?
Well, Republicans should be hoping that it could be Cornyn, because I think Cornyn could peel off Tallarico pretty easily. But I think, look, this is also a bigger conversation. Tallarico is an excellent candidate. And that is something I think Texans haven't seen for quite some time. For a Democrat to win statewide would be really something. The 90s is when we last saw it. And so I think 94, I believe, is the last time a Democrat won statewide office. But for Cornyn to not have gotten Trump's stamp of approval, I think, was especially telling of the times, and just kind of shows how the president operates these days. He really flies by the seat of his pants most days of the week, as we always know. But I think Ken Paxton was a very, very complicated candidate, a very bad candidate. And I think Trump would have been better off just to say, you know what, Cornyn, just go ahead and have it. Let's get rid of this guy.
I have a theory as why D.C. Republicans want Trump to weigh in right now, because they know if Ken Paxton continues to hammer away at Cornyn, there's a very good chance that the early polls in that runoff will show Paxton continuing to be ahead. And what Donald Trump does not want to do, and Dasha, you know this very well, he does not want to get behind a loser. And if John Cornyn is seen as someone who cannot win a general election, that is going to make Trump reticent, or at a minimum, the type of endorsement he will give will be a weak T endorsement that actually doesn't give the boost that Cornyn needs. Democrats feel very bullish about Texas. And looking at that Tallarico-Crockett primary, I think a key point that I would bring up, a key data point, Latino voters. That's why James Tallarico won that race, because Latino voters went in large droves to him. And if he can activate and engage and continue to stay relevant with Latino voters in Texas, who, by the way, probably feel very alienated by Donald Trump's first 15 months in office, that is the type of thing that Republicans are going to be dealing with all over the country. And I think in a place like Texas, where Latinos play an overwrought role, I think that could be a key indicator of what we're going to see that
What do you
happens.
think Democrats learn from Jasmine Crockett's loss and Tallarico's win here?
Well, I know that the lesson that people are going to try to overlearn is that, we shouldn't try to turn out the base, or we should only go for candidates who can talk to the other side. I think I'm going to sound like a broken record. Democrats need to do everything everywhere, meaning in Texas, James Tallarico probably has a slightly higher ceiling. I actually think Jasmine Crockett could probably win, definitely against Ken Paxton, and even against Cornyn in 2026, because Trump is so unpopular. But what Democrats have to get good at, and what I think they have gotten better at, find candidates that fit the place and the time, match the parochial issues, understand the culture of their localities and their states. I think Tallarico does that, which is why Republicans have spent a lot of money, whether or not it's Cornyn or Paxton in that race.
Yeah. Meanwhile, also in Texas, Dan Crenshaw became the first sitting member of Congress to lose in 2026. What does that say about where MAGA is at?
Yeah, it just says that he wasn't Trumpy enough for them. I mean, let's remember, it's a primary, so you're going to get your most ardent Republican supporters. These are the people that turn up in primaries, and they just didn't feel that Crenshaw was enough in line with Trump. I think that was really the moral of the story.
I was just going to add, too, it feels like there's a whole class of Republicans like Dan Crenshaw. These are people without a country. So if you're Dan Crenshaw, you need to turn up enough of the MAGA base, and you need to have them trust you enough for them to turn out. But your true whims might be actually more of an establishment Republican, and there's not enough of that vote to outweigh the MAGA, and you're going to turn off independents and Democrats. So you're kind of stuck in the middle. You got to pick a lane. You have to pick if you're going to be super MAGA or if you're going to be super establishment. And you've got Republicans like Crenshaw, and I think there are others like this around the country who are finding this out. That's why you're seeing so many retirements, I think, on the House Republican side. They cannot run without Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is the rainmaker on the Republican side.
But that's
still.
also what makes the Paxton-Cornyn dynamic interesting, right? Because Cornyn is seen as establishment, Paxton is seen as MAGA, and there have been some people warning me that if Trump snubs Paxton, that could actually really get him into some hot water with the MAGA base.
Well, I don't think he's that worried about that. I think he's not worried about the blowback from them, because what's it to him? At the end of the day, he's probably not going to be on the ballot next time. So I think for him...
Yeah, that probably.
Yeah, well, let's never say never with Donald Trump. But I think the real deal here is that he wanted somebody that would really almost kiss up to him. And Cornyn really never did it. And so that's what it was about from early days. And I think it just went a little too long. And again, Paxton being so complicated, but having sort of the ingrained goodwill, it was very messy. I see how it turned into a runoff.
You bring up the 2028 ballot, and there's some debate about what the war in Iran means for the potential contenders. I'm talking, of course, the names that everyone knows, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, and what this means for them. I want you to take a listen to something that former Meet the Press host Chuck Todd had to say about this. Listen.
Whatever identity J.D. Vance had going that was different from Donald Trump's is gone. And now you own everything he does. And he is certainly, and this, there's been nothing that he's, it's clear he's a little uncomfortable with this, right?
Of course, it's exactly the opposite of what he advocated.
But he cannot ever run against this. So he has lost the one thing that made him different is gone. The differentiator is gone. His America First credentials are just non-existent. For him, there is no recovering from this.
All right, what do we think of that hot take?
I completely agree. I think J.D. Vance is not going to be able to recover from this moment. And that is perfectly fine with President Trump, because I don't think he feels particularly great about J.D. I've seen J.D. sidelined for weeks on end. He's been sent out to jobs that probably nobody really wants. I don't see J.D. as a fixture, because if he were a fixture, if he were really going to be the one that carries Trump's legacy forward and hold the MAGA banner, he would be next to Trump every day of the week, and he's not.
I think the folks who are among the biggest losers on the Republican side are Vance and Rubio. We talked about J.D. Vance, of course. This goes completely against everything he is purported to believe about U.S. foreign policy intervention. But also Marco Rubio, who had disastrous media availabilities this week, talking about the reason why the American military went when they went is to be reactive and responsive to Israel and offensive strikes that they would make. I mean, things that not just, again, the broad public would disagree with, but that Donald Trump's base would disagree with. It cannibalizes his base. Yeah. So it makes Trump look bad. Yeah. It also just cuts at your base. I don't think Donald Trump's successor is in his administration right now. Meaning, I don't think the next Republican nominee exists in Donald Trump's administration.
I think they're
right
outside.
And I would just say, related to the Democratic race, I made this point earlier. Again, you cannot be a viable Democrat in 2028 and be anywhere near this war. This war is deeply unpopular, and it will only get more unpopular. And I think you are going to see Democrats who are wanting to be viable in 2028 race to get to the flank of each other about who can be more opposed to this.
We are only in the first days of this, the first weeks of this. We will see how things play out. I want to bring in our weekly feature, not on my bingo card, before I let you guys go. This is where we highlight a funny, offbeat, or downright weird political or cultural moment. During a Medal of Honor ceremony in the East Room of the White House on Monday, President Trump brought up the construction outside to build a White House ballroom and indicated the First Lady is eager to see the work completed.
I believe it's going to be the most beautiful ballroom anywhere in the world. And when you hear all that hammering out there, you know why the First Lady is not thrilled exactly. She said, will the pile drivers ever stop? You know, they go from 6 in the morning till 11:30 in the evening. Can you imagine? Here? You know what? To me, that's a beautiful sound. She doesn't like it. I love it. When I hear that sound, that beautiful sound behind me, it means money, so I like it. But my wife isn't thrilled. She said, this is getting crazy. I said, don't worry about it. We'll be all finished up in a few months.
That Medal of Honor ceremony, there were a lot of hard pivots from the war in Iran to the drapes in the White House to the ballroom. How would you feel as First Lady if you were getting disturbed all day and night?
Maybe move to one of the suburbs of D.C., as it's long been rumored that the First Lady does live outside, perhaps. No, I think this is, typical Trump. I laugh, but I'm sad on the inside that our president spends time talking about such trite things. But hey, to the average American, it seems relatable. He talks about the details and gives you a look inside and takes a moment to maybe not talk about the very
Joel, should
serious
Democrats
things.
put some construction caps on or what?
I do think a question Democrats are going to have to deal with whenever Donald Trump exits the White House, and maybe there's a Democrat that succeeds him. What do you do with all the changes, the cosmetic changes that Donald Trump
Do you take
has made
down
around
the gold? Do you break
take
the
down
marble?
that
Well,
gold?
come on, what are you going to do?
I think just as much as the American people may not care for Donald Trump's focus on it, they probably wouldn't care for Democrats being overly obsessed with pulling it back. So that's a real challenge for Democrats.
All right. Our real estate and design experts here. Thank you so much, Republican strategist Rina Shah and Democratic strategist Joel Payne. Really appreciate your time today.